The subject of, or the title of my presentation to you today is A Simple Story of Being a Servant, the True Essence of Leadership. My goals today are to inform you about the principles of servant leadership, as I understand them, in a simple and straightforward manner. And I also want to outline a simple process that people can use to implement the principles of servant leadership in their lives and in organizations that they're part of. I need to give you a disclaimer before I jump into the meat of this presentation that's relevant. The disclaimer is that the principles of servant leadership and the core ideas for this presentation are not my own. Although I believe that I have striven to practice servant leadership throughout my life in many settings. I have served as a chairman of many boards, as a founder and executive director of nonprofit organizations, and as a nurse supervisor in many different settings, as well as a director of nursing in at least 3 facilities. Those are just a few examples of where I feel I've used my servant leadership skills. In this presentation, I am depending for its content on the outstanding works of an author named James Hunter. He is the head of J.D. Hunter Association, LLC, which is a leadership training and development firm. James' first book, titled The Servant, A Simple Story About the True Essence of Leadership, enriched my own leadership when I read it in 2009. Again, recently, while I was preparing for this presentation, I discovered his second book, which he wrote 6 years later. And the title of that book is The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle: How to Become a Servant Leader. So thanks to Mr. Hunter, I'm able to offer this incomplete presentation of the principles of servant leadership, all the while hoping that your interest in the topic will be stimulated and your willingness to use the principles forthcoming. In the end, it is you who will decide the importance and the usefulness of leading as a servant in your own life. I recommend without hesitation you read James Hunter's books for a more comprehensive consideration of the topic. They're easily accessed on Amazon.com, and I encourage you to try to find them, or even in the local library. So, having stated my disclaimer, I want to begin by adding that you will not become a better leader by reading books, listening to tapes, watching videos, or attending presentations like this one. You learn about leadership by doing these things, but you will not become a better leader by simply doing these things. As with any skilled activity, you can gain information and insight to a subject by reading or participating in classes, but application and practice are the keys to totally successful acquisition of the skill set necessary to be a leader. No one ever learned to ride a bike by reading a book. There is considerable work and price to pay for developing the skills of servant leadership. As Mr. Hunter adds in his second book, becoming a servant leader requires a great deal of motivation, feedback, and extended practice, as does any worthwhile discipline. Becoming a better leader is not something that is grasped intellectually, like learning algebra or how to read a balance sheet. We become better leaders by applying our learning, our knowledge, our feedback, and our experience to everyday lives. To become a better leader, one must be willing and motivated to change and to grow. End of quote.
Bless you.
Change and growth in this case looks something like the following. One is motivated to seek out and receive sometimes painful feedback from others so one can see oneself more closely and clearly. One must have willingness to go down deep in oneself to explore the old scripts, the old habits, and the old behaviors that need to be identified and changed. And thirdly, one must be motivated to break old habits and begin learning new ones. And I make this note, there are few things more difficult in life than breaking deep-seated habits, which is why few benefit from simply taking a class or reading a book on leadership. much more than intellectual agreement is needed to do a right thing. At this point, I want to state my goals again for this presentation. I want to inform you about the principles of servant leadership as I understand them in a simple and straightforward manner. In my experience, these principles cannot be overstated. I also want to outline a simple process you can use to implement the principles of servant leadership in your own lives and organizations. I have not arrived in my own development as a leader, a husband, or a mentor, and I am surely not where I want to be, but I am further along than I used to be. We need to hear the principles of leadership again and again and then again. Once we have them coupled with the inherent knowledge about leadership that we all possess, more reminders to use them rather than more instruction about their use is best. Education in leadership principles without application is rather useless. So I am striving with the help of James Hunter to provide you a map eventually for implementation. Does anyone here know the definition of insanity?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Very good. That's exactly what it is. It is continuing to do what you've always done and hoping for different results. So let me ask you a challenging question then. By definition, can you improve if you do not change?
No. Change is inevitable.
So, if you believe in continuous improvement, then each of you must, by definition, be ready and willing to change. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. While I accept your affirmative answers as immediately sincere, in the long term, my experience is that you will have to do more than simply think and talk about change in order to change.
Right.
Change is difficult, and it requires effort as we move from the familiar and the comfortable to the unfamiliar and the uncomfortable. One of the underlying principles of leadership development is that leadership building and character building are one. I repeat, one of the underlying principles of leadership development is that leadership building and character building are one. I urge you to remember that the work and even the pain of changing the person we are, breaking old habits, and becoming someone different than we are today is no easy task. I repeat, leadership development and character development are one. Studies have determined and observers have concluded that the single greatest predictor of an organization's health or its dysfunction is, guess what? It's leadership, or lack thereof. Leadership development is essential to an organization, whether it is healthy or not. Unfortunately, there continues to be too many organizations, families, churches, athletic teams, and so on, who remain without successful leaders. James Hunter believes this widespread lack of leadership is a failure of character, which is why leadership has everything to do with character. Character is about doing the right thing. Leadership is about doing the right thing. It has even been suggested that managers do things right, while leaders do the right thing. I'll say that again. It has even been suggested that managers do things right, while leaders do the right thing.
In other words, could that be, it's not the means, it's the end
Correct.
type of philosophy?
Correct.
Well, because it filters down from the top. It's kind of like a...
As I go forward here, more will become clear about this difference between managers and leaders. But your point is well taken, Sylvia. It is true what you said. This is about the outcome, not the method, as much as, well, it's about both, but right now at this point in this discussion, it's about the outcome. The good news that we have in this is that we can all choose to do something about our character. In fact, we can choose to grow our character until leadership and doing the right thing becomes second nature to us. In his book, The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle, How to Become a Servant Leader, James Hunter defines leadership as the skills of influencing people to enthusiastically work toward goals identified as being for the common good, with character that inspires confidence. And I'll add the caveat that Mr. Hunter added that last phrase to the definition that he just gave us in his second book. It was not part of his first book. So he learned the essence or the essential nature of character and its relationship to leadership after he had written his first book. He became more convinced of it, I guess is a better way to express that. So what is significant to notice about Mr. Hunter's definition is that it does not mention technical ability, task completion, or managerial prowess. Management is about the things we do: planning, budgeting, organizing, problem solving, being in control, maintaining the order, developing strategies, and all those other things. Leadership is who we are. Leadership is who we are. Mr. Hunter has observed that good managers often have a style that is authoritative and command and control centered, because they mistakenly believe they must have all the answers, fix all the problems, and above all else, maintain control. He adds, simply knowing how to do the job well has little to do with developing the skills necessary to inspire others to do the job well. The technical and task-oriented skills that managers work so hard to develop and that have served them well in rising to leadership positions do not serve them well in becoming effective leaders. A whole different skill set is required. Leadership involves getting people from the neck up. Leadership involves getting people from the neck up. Leadership is influencing people to contribute their heart, their mind, their spirits, their creativity, and excellence, and to give their all for their team. Leadership is getting people to commit to the mission, to take the hill, to be all that they can be. Leadership is not about being the boss. You do not have to be in charge of others or in a position of power to meet the criteria of servant leadership. We have all met people who, with little or no power, have influenced others daily to be more enthusiastic, committed, and willing to be the best they can be. The operative concept here is influence others for good. The most effective teams are groups of all leaders, in which everyone is taking personal responsibility for the success of their team. Everyone on this team is influencing others and leaves a mark on the team. The most important question is what kind of mark each member will leave who serves on a team. Ideally, this type of group will work together to do whatever is necessary to accomplish the mission, including influencing customers and one another. When an organization is successful in getting its members to take leadership responsibility, to understand that everyone is responsible for the success of the team, it's an awesome sight to behold. According to Mr. Hunter, unfortunately, this largely untapped resource lies dormant in most of the organizations in the world. I concur with Mr. Hunter, having held both managerial and leadership positions in numerous church, public, and professional organizations throughout my career. The good news? There's signs of change in the leadership realm. Leadership's an awesome responsibility, ladies. And consider for a moment all the different leadership roles for which you may have signed up or volunteered for in your lifetime. Maybe you've been a manager, you're a spouse, you might be a parent, or a coach, or a teacher. Maybe you've been a clergy person. There's a lot of other roles that represent leadership. You can all think of your own as you're sitting here reflecting. Presumably, no one forces you to marry, be a parent, or to work and take a paycheck. You're doing it because you chose it. We come freely, and we are free to leave any of those situations anytime we want, especially in America. What is most essential to remember is that we selected something very important to be part of. Always remember, human beings have been entrusted to your care, and much is at stake. One should not approach a leadership role with a casual or a nonchalant attitude. Indeed, the ultimate test of leadership is this: are people better off when they leave you than when they met you? How we behave as a leader today may even affect what goes on around the dinner table in other people's homes. As Max Dupree, author of Leadership is an Art and Leadership Jazz, has said, leadership is a serious meddling in the lives of others. This is where servant leadership begins, ladies. We need to consider strongly the huge responsibility for which we have signed up, and recognize that our choices and our behaviors are impacting other people's lives. If I have gotten you to reflect on this awesome responsibility inherent in your leadership roles, I will have moved you to take an important first step toward your growth and change. Any one of you will positively or negatively influence the lives of others simply by how you behave on a daily basis. In the words of basketball coaching legend John Wooden, a leader has a most powerful influence on those he or she leads. I consider it a sacred trust. Leadership's a skill. Leadership is something that we must learn. It is something that must be learned. Warren Bennis adds, the most dangerous leadership myth is that leaders are born, that there is a genetic factor to leadership. This myth asserts that people simply either have certain charismatic quality or they don't. That's nonsense. In fact, the opposite is true. Leaders are made rather than born. End of quote. According to James Hunter, barring serious mental or emotional deficiencies, the seeds of leadership are present and available to the vast majority of our population. Leadership is a latent skill waiting to be developed in most people. Leadership is a latent skill waiting to be developed in most people. Mr. Hunter concludes that whether they are born or they are made is a crucial point, because if we believe that leadership is a set of traits we are born with or without, then we do not take responsibility for it. We do not have to take responsibility for it if we believe that. We can just blame our ancestors. Once we've been lured by the fact that leadership is a skill, we may take the hook and ask ourselves, what am I doing to develop that skill to the best of my ability? Clearly, we can choose to develop the skill of leadership. We can choose to further develop our own character. We can choose to be someone different in the future than we are today. In his second book, The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle, How to Become a Servant, Hunter states, leadership is influence. It is influencing people to willingly, even enthusiastically, contribute their hearts, their minds, their creativity, their excellence, and other resources toward mutually beneficial goals. Leadership is influencing people to commit to the mission. Leadership is influencing people to become the best they are capable of becoming. Accordingly, leadership is not synonymous with management. Leadership is synonymous with influence. End of quote. Leadership is about character. Life is not so much about what happens to us, it is how we respond to what happened to us. This space between cause and result is known as the world of character. Hunter defines character as our moral maturity and commitment to do the right thing regardless of the personal costs. Character involves the will to respond to stimuli according to values and principles rather than to appetites, urges, whims, or impulse. Leadership is character in action, and leadership development and character development are one. Character is doing the right thing. Leadership is doing the right thing. The ultimate test of leadership is whether people are better off because a leader was among them. A leader leaves his or her mark, and the ultimate question remains: what type of mark was left behind? If you become confused as to how you are doing as a leader, find out how the people you lead are doing. If you become confused as a leader, then see how the people around you are doing. And you'll know the answer to your question. Again, to paraphrase Mr. Hunter, servant leadership is not necessarily a soft form of leadership. He informs us that servant leaders can be very autocratic when it comes to certain aspects of running an organization. Aspects like the mission, the values, or in other words, what are the rules that govern behavior? The standards, how do we define and measure excellence? And accountability, what happens if there's a gap between standards and performance? Great servant leaders can be quite dictatorial when it comes to these matters. Servant leadership does not abdicate responsibility to define the mission, set the rules, set the standards, and define accountability. The servant leader does not commission a poll, conduct a committee meeting, or have a democratic vote to determine answers to these questions. Indeed, people look to the leader to provide this direction. However, once the direction has been provided, it becomes time to turn the organizational structure upside down and help people to win. The leadership now becomes responsive to those being led by identifying and meeting legitimate needs so that they can become the best that they are capable of becoming and effectively accomplish the stated mission. All right, let me turn now to some points that I want to share about power and authority and how these concepts relate to servant leadership. It's been said by Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher, that not making a choice is itself a choice. The only two certainties in life are death and what?
Taxes.
No. Death and choices. I concur with Mr. Hunter
Taxes be number 3.
that the quality of our lives, leadership, and our character are determined by the quality of our daily choices. When we assume the role of a leader, we make the first choice. Now, as a leader, we have to make another choice. Are we going to lead by power or through authority? According to Hunter, the vast majority of traditional leadership roles come pre-packaged with power. But relatively few leaders ever develop the authority to accompany the power with which they have been entrusted. Power is the ability to force or coerce others to do your will, even if they would choose not to, because of your position or your might. Put another way, power implies do it or else. If I have the ability to spank you, bomb you, beat you up, write you up, fire you, I can compel you to do my will. Authority, on the other hand, is something quite different than power. Authority is the skill of getting others willingly to do your will because of your personal influence. I repeat that. Authority is the skill of getting others willingly to do your will because of your personal influence. The anticipated response given to a leader with authority is, I'll do it for you. Another way to look at power and authority is this. Power can be bought and sold, given and taken away. Not so with authority. Authority is never bought or sold, never given or taken away. Authority is about who you are as a person. You inspire me, the person you are. Authority is about your character. A central theme of this presentation is that legitimate leadership must be built upon authority. Power doesn't work. Power does work, but over time there's a downside to power. It damages relationships.
Oh.
Powering others around, soon you will see nasty behaviors start coming at you. You might ask, what do damaged relationships have to do with business? The answer to that is everything. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing that, because you were right. It's everything. No matter what product or service an organization produces, its staff is in the relationship business. Without people, there's no business. The only reason any organization exists is because it meets a human need. When an organization fails to meet those needs, or a competitor meets the needs better, the organization will cease to exist. Profit is an essential component of a healthy organization, but it is not why an organization exists. Healthy organizations consist of healthy relationships between customers, employees, owners, and significant others like vendors, suppliers, the union, and the government. Healthy relationships evoke healthy businesses. Bad relationships evoke bad businesses. The way to develop healthy relationships is to serve and meet legitimate needs over the long term. Using the power style of management gives rise to nasty collateral activities, including head games, adversarial confrontation, low trust, cronyism, political games, and a host of other unhealthy behaviors damaging to relationships, and in the end, damaging to an organization. Power style management creates fear and it undermines trust, which ultimately destroys relationships and growth.
Yes.
A power culture literally sucks the spirit out of an organization. I think by now I've shown you that many of the principles of servant leadership are self-evident. Most of us know them, but we may not realize that we know them because we remain locked in the old ideas and the old models of leadership. The power style of leadership has been around throughout the history of mankind. Top-down control and command leadership has served the ancients while building monuments, dictators and czars while grabbing resources of various countries, generals and other military dictators and leaders directing soldiers. And it continues to serve many modern enterprises where the popular attitude among managers is, I don't want you to think. I just want you to do what I say. Or, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. Or, another way, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Put it another way. I want you from the neck down, is what these people are saying. I just want you to physically be able to do what I want you to do. I don't care what you think. Henry Ford once said, why is it always I get the person, no, why is it I always get the whole person when all I really want is a pair of hands? That was something he remarked.
Interesting.
Well, in this type of work culture, employees are expected to look upward, to making the boss happy and being responsive to what he or she wants. Mr. Hunter points out that in this type of culture, employees are promoted according to their technical and functional expertise, or because they are good soldiers. And even worse, in this culture, people are often promoted to their level of incompetence, a practice dubbed the Peter Principle. This principle assumes that people who are technically strong or can do the job best can get others to do the job well by telling them how to do it. This is clearly wrong thinking. Just because one can do a job well does not mean that he or she can inspire and influence others to do the job well. Rather, a new way of thinking and a new and different skill set are actually required. For leaders who are used to immediate gratification, and quantifiable results at the end of a day, the measure of their success as leaders typically rests upon the style they know best to get results. That is the do it this way and do it now style. Efforts made to do right by people, deposits made in emotional bank accounts, or efforts made in coaching, teaching, and encouraging people may not show fruit for weeks, months, or even years. That is why they choose not to take that course of action. They want it to be instant gratification. The new the new set of skills proves very challenging for power-minded leaders and managers to accept. Leadership requires that we develop the essential life skills of delaying gratification and being patient, trusting in the law of the harvest, and having faith that we do our part. If we do our part, the fruit will come. We must be willing to bear the trial of not knowing when the fruit will arrive, or even if the fruit will ever be evident in some of the people that we interact with. Enlightened by the need for patience and leadership, there should be no mystery why the world is replete with many bad bosses. We live dominated by instant gratification. In today's world, having power-centered managers running organizations is very costly. Employees today are not as willing as in the past to accept power management. Today, more employees are inclined to make claims in court about intentional infliction of emotional distress, accompanied by discrimination and harassment. Needless to say, the financial consequences of these lawsuits can be astronomically hurtful to businesses and individual managers against whom the charges are made. In the end, it seems evident that preventing such consequences deserves serious attention and immediate action. As I see it, retraining leaders in a more effective leadership style, and that being servant leadership, should be considered as a first line of defense. Authority has been defined as the skill of getting others to willingly do your will because of your influence. Power over people is one thing. Authority with people is quite another. Again, leadership is influence. Legitimate authority, or influence, must be earned and does not come from a job title, nameplate, or any special perk. Durable success as a leader requires that one learn how to build authority or influence with other people. Building influence is not about manipulating, persuading, or pressuring people for your personal benefit. Hunter believes leadership is influencing people for mutual benefit. Leadership is the willingness to extend oneself and meet the needs of another human being. The choice to seek the good of those we lead must be a choice freely made and freely given. Leadership is a choice made because it is the right thing to do, regardless of the return that may or may not come to the leader as a result. Authority can be built by most people who have the will to serve others. Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of a Highly Effective People, put it this way: anyone can be a servant leader. Any one of us can take initiative. It doesn't require that we be an appointed leader, but it does require that we operate from moral authority. The spirit of servant leadership is the spirit of moral authority. In a relationship built on authority, when discipline is required, all the leader may need to do is look at the follower in the eye and say, "I'm really disappointed in you." Mm-hmm. In a relationship built on authority, the follower would probably prefer to be yelled at or written up than to have disappointed the leader. And rest assured, the follower is not going to want to disappoint the leader anytime soon again. Hunter summarizes this type of interaction built on authority in this way: it is the most powerful form of human motivation on the planet. Jesus Christ once said, "Anyone wanting to be a leader among you must first be the servant, If you choose to lead, you must serve. Leading with power is a skill that is easily grasped and used by most people by the age of 2. Any one of you who spend time around children know what I'm talking about. We don't call it the terrible twos for nothing. By adolescence, I learned that there are consequences to using power. Knuckle sandwiches, detentions, extra chores imposed by my parent, and broken relationships, to name a few. In my experience, I have striven to please bosses regardless of what they have asked me to do. Sometimes when I did not please the boss, the hammer came down. It became evident to me as a follower that being led by power did not work in the long run. I usually felt hurt and put down by the power approach of leadership. Now that I'm in the position of being the boss, I know that I want to serve others in a more respectful and effective way. I have accepted that the only way that I can effectively lead others, influence their choices from the neck up, and get them to act willingly is to serve. In the words of James Hunter, legitimate leadership or influence is built upon serving, sacrificing, and seeking the greatest good of those being led. Influence does not come because of a title or ownership. Influence must be earned. There are no shortcuts. A simple truth in leadership is that you get others what they need. They will get you everything you need in return. Again, Hunter points out, our leadership will be defined not by what we accomplish, but by what we get accomplished through others.
Huh.
If we get people what they need, they will make us look great. Whenever we extend ourselves, sacrifice, and serve others, we build authority and thereby influence. No one is suggesting that you die at the office. But how about extending ourselves to appreciate people? How about we sacrifice and take a little more time listening to others? How about working on being more trusting and less controlling? Maybe we could lend a hand and assist people to be the best that they are capable of becoming. Can we give that much at the office? For those who may be skeptical about this idea because you know people who sometimes will not respond to authority, know that your skepticism is valid for a predictable 10% of the people being led. They not only will not respond to authority and compassionate influence, but they will try to sabotage what is being built by your organization. The best course of action in such cases is to remove them as soon as possible. Martin Luther King Jr. recognized this truth when he said, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verbs agree to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love." Mr. Hunter concludes, when we are dedicated to meeting the legitimate needs of others, serving them, we may have to sacrifice our self-interest for the greater good. We may have to sacrifice our need to be liked, our bad habit of avoiding conflict, our desires to have all the answers, to look good, to always be right. When we serve others, we have to forgive, apologize, and give others credit even when we do not feel like it. When we extend ourselves for others, we will be rejected, underappreciated, and even taken advantage of at times. Indeed, we will have to sacrifice and subordinate anything that gets in the way of doing the right thing with and for people. End of quote. Unfortunately, many leaders find this too high a price to pay. Many believe that once they have arrived as the leader, it is their turn to be served. Says Peter Drucker, "No leader is worth his salt who won't set up the chairs." The good news is that anyone can serve others. Each of us has the capacity to make a difference in another person's life. And this is especially true for those of us in the leadership positions. Undoubtedly, there is joy in serving, but it is not for the faint of heart. It is difficult work to serve. It is also great remedy for personal suffering. As Carl Menninger recommended for a person about to suffer a nervous breakdown, lock up your house, go across the railroad tracks, and find someone in need and do something for them. In other words, go get out of me for a while, and me will start doing a whole lot better. Another concise quote offered by Abraham Lincoln speaks well to this concept. He said, "When I do good, I feel good." It is a choice to decide to serve others or merely serve ourselves. Ultimately, we must choose between being a servant leader and being a self-serving leader. Being a servant leader necessitates being willing to love others. This is not love in the emotional sense, but a volitional love. Hunter defines volitional love as the love of the will. He expounds that volitional love is the choice, the willingness of a person to be attentive to the legitimate needs, best interests, and welfare of another, regardless of how he or she happens to feel on a certain day. Volitional love requires that we love people we do not like and seek what is in their best interests. For our purpose today, love is defined as the acts of extending yourself for others by identifying and meeting their legitimate needs and seeking their greatest good. I repeat that. Love is defined as the acts of extending yourself for others by identifying and meeting their legitimate needs and seeking their greatest good. The proper paraphrase of love is as love does. I've often heard said in organizations and offices where I have worked that the staff perceive themselves to be family-like. This perception implies a bond that exceeds the level of acquaintances. It is also a notion that seems reasonable considering the fact that most of us spend about 50% or more of our lives in the company of those we work with. The fact is, most of us literally have a home and family and a work family. Since familial relationships succeed when they are based on love and respect, it would follow that we would hope to find love and respect in both our work families and our home families. Over the years, I have read or heard the following passage known as the love passage, taken from the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It is resoundingly an excellent definition of what volitional love should look like. This is what it says. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not puffed up or arrogant. It does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. It does not take into account a wrong suffered. It does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, endures all things, it never fails. Where on this list do we see any feelings? Where is the part about love is romance? Love is passion. Love is a fine dinner or dancing. Instead, what we see is a lot of work on this list. True love extends beyond the immediacy of a honeymoon relationship. True love requires commitment and endurance in our relationships. The same is true about our leadership. Anyone can sign up to be spouse, parent, boss, coach, or teacher. But when the going gets tough, then we see what our relationships are actually made of. These 8 qualities of love epitomize the very essence of servant leadership, and they embody the true meaning of character. Loving others is about doing the right thing. Leadership is about doing the right thing. Character is about doing the right thing. Again, leadership development and character development are one. What is essential to leadership development? The following qualifiers apply. Leadership requires patience. Leadership requires kindness. Leadership requires humility. Leadership requires respect. Leadership requires selflessness. Leadership requires forgiveness. Leadership requires honesty. Leadership requires commitment. Upon receiving this list, you might remark, I'm not into loving the people I work with. I just want to work and get my job done. They aren't coming home with me. Or you might say, no one's able to possess all these qualities and to practice them unerringly. Or you might decide, these qualities sound good, but I'm happy with my relationships as they are. I don't see a need to change them. I urge you to put aside these opinions and fake it until you make it. Don't worry about feelings. Practice the behaviors of love, and therefore you will be practicing the behaviors of leadership. To use the words of C.S. Lewis, do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. Please understand, I am not trying to get you to like each other. I'm trying to get you to love each other. I'm not concerned about how you feel about each other, but I am concerned with how you behave toward each other. Forget about the feelings, and for now, focus on how we are treating each other. You will find the feelings will follow later. One of the best tools I've discovered for leading effectively is good listening. The majority of people, if they listen at all, listen selectively while thinking. Will Rogers once said, if we don't know it was our turn to talk next, nobody would listen. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. I do know from personal experience that empathic listening is far superior to the average listener's method. Empathic listening is the skill, the discipline of extending yourself for others by really working to see it as they see it and feel it as they feel it. It requires kicking all the noise and chatter out of our minds and getting ourselves fully present for what is being said. Empathic listening is hard work, and it requires a great deal of effort. Empathic listening is one of the best ways to build trust with another human being. The good news is that empathic listening is a skill that can be developed over time. Good listening skills are not something we are born with, any more than our leadership is something we are born with. If you doubt this fact, ask yourselves, have I ever met a 2-year-old who is a good listener? Listening is an attitude toward people. Hunter says, listening is developing the willingness, even the desire, to hear people out, better understand them, and learn something new from them. Have any of you ever learned anything while you were talking? An axiom of leadership states that everything done by a leader sends a message. Think of the number of opportunities we have every day to send a message to people about how much we value or do not value them, by how we make the effort to really listen to them. Failing to listen sends overt messages to those watching and doing the speaking. None of those messages will benefit to our advantage. James Hunter reminds us, one of the most powerful dynamics of human interaction is when people feel as though they have been heard. Hearing someone does not mean that we agree with them. Rather, it is working to understand where the speaker is coming from and then going to a new place together. We are to listen and make no excuses, nor defend ourselves or the organization in any way. We are to remain silent and listen, with the exception of asking for clarification as needed. Eventually, after the speaker feels assured that he or she has been heard, then an effective active listening process can follow. and lead toward change as it's needed. Most of us are drawn to friends, family, co-workers, and mentors whom we believe listen well. Always remember, if you want good relationships, then practice being a good listener. Leaders are expected to hold others accountable for their attitudes, performance, and the outcomes of work. When we do not practice holding others accountable, or allow for ourselves to be held accountable in an accepted way, we are in effect lying to those around us, because we are pretending that everything's okay, and everything is not okay. Employees of an organization, family members, friends, church members, club members, to name a few, do not benefit from a lack of accountability. In fact, they will probably be worse off because they, like the rest of us, are moving in a direction either getting better or getting worse. About the only one who benefits from a lack of accountability is the person whose responsibility it is to hold the others accountable. He or she doesn't have to deal with it and can avoid the hassle. Think of all the excuses we give ourselves for not doing the right thing and holding people accountable for their actions. Not only children, but adults have a need to know what the boundaries and expectations are and to be held accountable for right actions and right behavior. A leader who disregards our need for responsibility and accountability literally robs us of something we need the most. Accountability helps to push us towards being our best. Mr. Hunter reminds us, managers should feel insulted when someone performs below standards, breaks rules, or behaves irresponsibly in their presence. Why? The answer? Because the employee may be acting with the assumption that nothing will be done about it by the manager. What a message of disrespect that is. When employees do not perform according to set organizational standards, they are also expecting you to behave dishonestly by not doing anything about it. Discipline or training is done because people are cared about. Because we want them to be the best they can be. And because it is our responsibility as a leader. That is what a leader signs up for. Richard Green, president of Blistex, believes it is immoral not to fire those who can't do the job. His point, think how much is at stake when we fail to take action with poor performers. Think of the bad messages we send to everyone watching about our lack of commitment to excellence and our failure to do the right thing. Think of the risk to our organization if we allow poor performance. Organizations do fail, ladies. People do lose their jobs, and lives are turned upside down. There's an awful lot at stake. In summary, about love and leadership, I want to say that it is essential that we believe our leaders can be trusted. I repeat, I want to say it is essential that we believe our leaders can be trusted. An effective leader is expected to handle the ambiguities inherent in hugging and spanking. Always remember, once we accept and trust a leader, we will usually buy into whatever mission the leader has. Leadership is about right choices being made until they become habit. It is the right thing to do to be patient, kind, humble, respectful, selfless, forgiving, honest, and committed. Effective leaders know that solid character is essential to leadership, and they work hard to make the right decisions. Effective leaders understand that they are becoming something different every day by the choices they make. A Chinese proverb states, if you do not change your direction, you will end up exactly where you are headed. We must all ask ourselves this question or remain in the status quo. The greatest leader is the greatest servant, the one most dedicated to meeting the needs of most needy world. I must look from top to bottom for great servant leaders of the world because they are often found serving coffee on airplanes, cleaning out bedpans, changing diapers, preparing meals at soup kitchens, and coaching kids after school. Leadership begins with a choice to be a leader. When we then are required to make additional choices to act accordingly. We need to ask ourselves, am I going to love the people entrusted to my care? If I answer yes, then I must be prepared to serve and sacrifice because I cannot love people, by definition, without serving and sacrificing for them. When I serve and sacrifice for others, I build authority or influence. And when I build influence, I begin to earn the right to be called a leader. For me personally, it is a great honor when I am told that I am a trustworthy person and a trustworthy leader. So I want to close in thanking you all for your attention this afternoon and for your decisions to be part of the team at TLC. I also thank you for your consistent and your right choices about meeting the needs of those in your care. And I firmly believe that you are going to be blessed for doing so. End of story. So, any conversation you'd like to have, ladies? Let's open it up a little bit and get some thoughts from you.
As you were talking,
Here's the off button.
I was singing this morning, coming into work, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could do,
I can't.
love
Is that the
lifted
stop
me.
button? I can't see it.
And love to me